Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm Brian Parks, CEO at JamFactory, for those who don't know. Let me start by acknowledging that we're here on the lands of the Kaurna people and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the important spiritual connection they have to these lands today, and acknowledge any First Nations people that might be here. This is the first talk of our Term 4 series of talks, and you see the lineup of speakers for this term looks fantastic. Starting today with Katheryn Leopoldseder, Leopoldseders, I've got to get it right. Fantastic jeweller from Melbourne, graduate from RMIT, and currently exhibiting some really beautiful work in the Pearlescent exhibition that opens tomorrow night in Gallery 2. That has been curated by Katheryn, and Katheryn identified Katheryn as an absolutely perfect addition to the mix of that show. And I was just talking then, the idea of sending the work by freight or something soon gave way to the idea of coming over with it, which gave us the opportunity to have Katheryn here live in the flesh. First time out of the state of Victoria since the pandemic. Yes. So please give her a big welcome.
All right, thank you. So does that all sound okay for you guys? Forgive me that I will probably read a lot of this because that's kind of the limit of my capacity at the moment. But yes, I'm Katheryn Leopoldseder. You just heard, a jeweller and an artist trained at RMIT in gold and silversmithing a long time ago. And my work encompasses 3 primary aspects, or revenue streams. Sometimes they're revenue streams. Handcrafted collections that I retail through my studio at the Abbotsford Convent, my website, and various contemporary jewellery galleries like Aspects and the E.G. Tile Studio Ingot. Bespoke commissions, driven by an intersection between, I guess, my aesthetic and the client's objectives, or in the best case scenario, by my aesthetic, and that's it. So that's one that I made for a geologist. And my exhibition practice. So let's take a look at some of my jewellery collections. Each distinct collection has developed from a different foray into a theme, a memory, or a discovery I've made while exploring a process. The collections evolve over time and range between accessible staple pieces to one-off more elaborate expressions of the theme. So just a few pieces from vintage stamp, which I developed from a bunch of inherited leatherworking stamps with the lost wax casting technique. So, like most things, I found out the vintage tools are better than the new tools. The old ones were hand chiselled, so they're more articulated and, give a great imprint. So this is Urban Flower. This grouping came out of a form I developed back at uni while examining the notion of belonging and what would become a running theme in my work, the idea of beauty emerging from adversity. If you can imagine the flower completely folded up, it would make a little house. These shapes first appeared, I'll whiz through that a bit, from this old piece that I made at uni, where I isolated the patterns from a print on a piece of clothing that my mother had asked me to return to my father after they had separated. I turned those patterns into flowers, and the gold elements are crafted from my father's wedding ring. The necklace is beautiful but also scratchy, an early indicator of a direction that would continue to inform my future exhibition works. In that through considering wearing the piece, it makes you conscious of its impact and sometimes even the discomfort on your body. So this engagement with the body helps to narrate some of the content that I hope to get across in the artwork. And this, whoops, hang on. This is a very large artwork, way back from uni. It's a little bit scary to dredge these up, but I think that's, I don't know, about 1.5 metres across necklace. So I made that as part of that same body of work, and this is what made from lead. And so it's very heavy and also toxic. And it's a piece about the long-term effects of illness on family relationships. But you can see me using my very delicate hacksaw up there to cut the links, so that, scaling up and making jewellery large kind of began back at uni. Hang on a second. Selecting materials for their inherent meanings, a focus on craftsmanship and story, and using the language of personal adornment and its unique relationship to the body to contemplate the human condition, our place in the environment, belief, values, perception, and projected identity, probably started back here. These are sort of awkward beginnings, but those themes have continued on. So this is my C collection, which you'll become familiar with tomorrow in the exhibition Pearlescent at the JamFactory. And with this grouping, with these forms, they just keep kind of coming to me, I guess, from my seaside childhood on the Mornington Peninsula, fossicking for shells, and I guess I often use pearls in this body of work because it's that beauty from adversity theme again, where an oyster will have an irritant trapped in its shell and secrete layers of nacre till eventually it forms a pearl to protect the flesh of the oyster from the pain. So I was very fortunate to be commissioned by the Australian Federal Government to create brooches from this collection that featured Australia's unique South Sea pearls. These were given as gifts to the wives of the international delegates attending the G20 summit some years ago. And here you can see the Chinese First Lady wearing the brooch and expertly cradling a Tasmanian devil. She looks so happy about it. So I'll introduce you a little bit to my exhibition work, which I've developed concurrently with my jewellery practice. And I find that each informs the other, either in the discovery of new forms, crossover in narrative, or really bedding down technique until it becomes viable to use in my collections. So I'll show you some of the earlier projects and then we'll take a look at my recent exhibition. This is a really huge necklace. I thought when I made the lead one I would never do that again, and then I probably quadrupled the size with that one. So I think it's about 4 metres by 3 metres. This one's called Devotion, and it was commissioned by the City of Melbourne to honour and repurpose the love locks that were removed from the South Bank Bridge. Devotion threads a reference to a history of metal objects exchanged as symbols of love. The necklace makes an association between the modern love lock ritual and the historical convict love tokens, pennies that convicts would engrave with messages of devotion, prayers and farewells. Often the coins were threaded onto ribbon to be worn around a loved one's neck, and upon their farewell it would be left with the people left behind. Devotion is massive, constructed from hundreds of engraved padlocks, love locks. Scattered throughout the necklace are the coins that I cast from some of the original padlocks. These are engraved with significant quotes about love that I collected from the public via social media, paying homage to the public ritual of clipping a love lock to a municipal structure. Conversely to the locks, which are personal gestures subversively attached to public structures, the convict coins were currency deliberately taken from circulation, defaced, engraved and exchanged with loved ones to be worn privately and intimately. So if you ever visit my studio, you'll see this one at the convent. It's called Love Thy Neighbour, and it's a very big chandelier made like a jeweller, lots of threading and crimping and swearing. Constructed from 70 times 7 used disposable communion cups, Love Thy Neighbour contrasts our consumption and overwhelming waste against the apparent commission to be stewards of the earth. The title, Love Thy Neighbour, is engraved across 3 of the cups, along with the chandelier's rippled formation, which asks the question, what does it mean to love our neighbour if adopting a disposable culture impacts their environments? This project is drawing out the gold. It's a crown of gold and silver alfalfa, positioned beside a spun brass dish, which I sort of piled with dirt, a kind of an offering of soil. The artwork honours the Mexican-born nanoscientist Jorge Garcia Torres Day, whose childhood land was leached by chemicals and used in industrial gold mining. Jorge discovered that through the natural processes of phytoremediation, alfalfa mines alluvial gold, drawing it from the soil into its stem and its leaves. The crown was accompanied by a choral soundscape, which was an amalgamation of the sounds of things growing through the earth and a composition by musician Luke Howard. And this is probably where you start to see me tackle inviting the audiences into a more immersive experience of the crafted object. The crown adorns the head, alluding to the mind. The act of putting on the crown symbolises a shift in thinking, from current approaches to mining to new and innovative approaches. The flat underside of the crown, evident when it is worn, references the halo. Historically, a crown stems from the halo seen in religious art. So this halo crown suggests rulership and higher thinking, in this case alluding to the kind of transcendent thinking that should come with positions of leadership. The crown of golden alfalfa materialises a collaboration between nature and humanity into a marker of identity, as people entrusted with a positive care of the earth. And here are a few pieces from my first major solo exhibition, Where Moth and Rust Decay, which came out of my travel through India. And so I've been to India quite a number of times in quite a different capacities, as with NGOs, but also as an artist. And I looked at the sort of mutual, I can't think of a better word, but fetishization of each other's cultures through capitalism, or as a means of escaping the complexities of the shortfalls of one's own culture. Geez, heavy topics. So I guess when I was there, I found it really confronting because the first time I went there, we were in very tribal, rural communities, and there was so much discussion about what we owned as white visitors. People flocked to understand what was in our handbags and whether we had phones and whether we had a car back home, and there was just so much interest in that. But then we also met so many Western travellers who were kind of trying to escape capitalist culture and have a spiritual experience in India, and so the two experiences were causing a tension in me that I wanted to explore. So, using a visual language of spiritual devotion familiar to the Indian people, and ascribing this language also to the insatiable acquisition of stuff that is indicative of the West, Where Moth and Rust Decay was a meander through different aspirational possessions from both cultures that we each tend to put our faith in but can ultimately prove fallible. Beginning with this triptych, there is a collapsible slum dwelling, which is also a necklace, alongside a classic 3-bedroom brick veneer house, ring, with this open brickwork that gives it a fragile impression. And actually the floor plan is based on my grandmother-in-law's 50s suburban house. And both are under the sun, all under the same sun, all the same under the sun. The slum dwelling is hinged, standing precariously and threatening to collapse at any instant. This is a regular occurrence in India's sprawling slums. Sometimes these makeshift communities are bulldozed and the people displaced. Suburban dream. The sun. Security amulet and Venetian blind tragedy. So this is a security door. Both examples of the measures we take in the Western world to screen ourselves from the outside world and protect ourselves and our possessions. The Venetian blind, an iconic soft furnishing that winds up revealing its tragic fallibility with one breach by a cat or a small child. This is Tata Nano Traffic Jam. It's a choker. The Tata Nano was designed as the world's cheapest car to get more Indian people on the road. The car is a status symbol, so we met families that had sold their ancestral land to own a car for which there is little adequate infrastructure, and those families were now living in those cars. These rings, they actually move the fan. You can turn the fan and the mirror. These rings are the household idols. The god of distraction, which is an earphone bud, the god of comfort, which is a ceiling fan, and the god of self, a vanity mirror. And so while I was in India, I made these in Australia, but when I returned to India to show this exhibition, I had one of the local woodworkers make an altar in the sense of a traditional household altar that these would live in. And this bangle, trading culture for Coke, references a confronting experience I had when first travelling in India with an NGO. At the airport, I photographed this advertisement for Coca-Cola. Should I read it, or are you all happy to? A mighty ocean we are not, but we are the little drops that make one. Because I can't read my screen. Because small things go a long way, at Coca-Cola India, we believe that there's more to a little sip. It's the moment of truth, a second of satisfaction, an instant of happiness, a bubble of hope. Because we don't just quench your thirst, we recharge your soul for one moment, one drop at a time. So shortly after we were taken into the heart of the largest slum in the Northern Hemisphere, where a large crowd of people had gathered to meet us, having pooled their money to honour our arrival and refresh us after our long journey, they proudly produced a bottle of Coke. So the bangle has the form of an ancient artefact. Bangles are possibly the most important jewellery type in India. Where there would usually be gems is foil from a Coke can, referencing the Indian jewellery technique of foil backing rose-cut gems to give them extra sparkle. I showed this exhibition in Melbourne, and then I self-funded it to take it to India to kind of have the other side of the discussion. It was really quite a groundbreaking moment for contemporary jewellery, because though India has one of the richest cultures for jewellery in the world, there is very little contemporary jewellery. Then I got dengue fever and I nearly died. What I really want to share with you is my most recent exhibition, before the one that you'll see tomorrow, which kind of culminates all the learnings through all these previous projects and more that I've showed you today. New Day, narratives from the convent through jewellery, objects and digital collaborations. This exhibition pays homage to the arts and cultural precinct of which I have been a part of for more than 15 years. Actually, so that's my studio, that window on the right. This is part of the main convent building that the rest of it is sort of centred around. This is where these are all nuns' bedrooms, basically. some art event that we had in the early days. And that's a classic open day. And then I put the blowtorch on and everyone goes, The Abbotsford Convent, a place that was built in response to local destitution to house 3 types of women and girls: orphans, the so-called wayward girls that were sent to be reformed through unpaid labour, washing sheets for the hotels in the area, and school children from wealthy Catholic landowners. In recent years, the site was earmarked for partial demolition and development into 189 apartments, until the local community fought for 7 years to win it back to the people and build a precinct for art, education and community. I'm amongst those very first tenants, that very first intake of tenants, benefiting from the campaign to save the convent, and very honoured to have been a formative part of building it into the multi-arts precinct it is today. So, this exhibition has been my most ambitious and multi-layered project. I developed it over 4 years and spent the better part of 2 of them in lockdown. Melbourne. 3 postponements. I think it was, it was a long time. It is significant in a few ways because in an attempt to bridge a gap between object and people's ability to engage deeply with the work, I created it, and in collaboration with a bunch of other extremely talented artists, I created these immersive digital responses for each artwork. So I worked with some of the other convent tenants. We're very lucky to have ANAM, the Australian National Academy of Music, now based at the Abbotsford Convent. So I worked with some of the musicians, with an actress, Anna McGahn, and she's also an author. I worked very collaboratively with my photographer, and I think that was across 3 lockdowns. So we took photos of the work in different rooms at the convent and got put into lockdown 3 times during that time, and just had to leave all our stuff and go. So it was very sort of jarring experience. It was sort of like you come back 5 months later and go, right, what were we doing again? But also in a way the extra time brought a richness to it. Though my intention was to create a bridge to the objects, I couldn't really have foreseen that the exhibition, after 3 postponements, 262 days in lockdown, and an epidemic of disconnection, would fall just as people were emerging from this intense season of isolation. So these short digital experiences wound up being a very accessible, meditative bridge for those of us that were experiencing the fragmentation and short attention spans created by trauma. This is called New Day. It's a sun, big brass sun, and I've attempted to photograph each piece in an environment that related to the story and the work. This is the back of one of the buildings, but it created this horizon line. And so I'm now going to I'll show you the work, and then I'll give you a short introduction to each work, and then play you the digital experience that visitors would have experienced when they were coming to the show and seeing the work on the wall. Poised on the horizon, the sun continues to preside over all the goings-on at the convent, signifying natural cycles and new beginnings. The convent is experiencing its own new day, a creative dawn built upon both the challenges and achievements of previous ages and the vision of its people today. So I worked with a violist, Ruby Shires, and she composed this. So she actually took parts of a classical piece, Haydn's Sunrise String Quartet. This is Abide, a corridor of earrings, made from the steel salvaged from the restoration works at the convent. The corridor of earrings reflects the sisters whose monastic rhythms inhabited the convent's lofty halls, an existence punctuated by prayer, times of the day, light and dark, seasonal shifts, collective footsteps, and the fall of light from arched windows as they walked in groups along the corridors. Nuns walked in groups of 3, lest 2 should be prone to gossip. So actually, that was a recording of 3 of the current artists walking the grounds of the convent. The keys, established by nuns sent from a French order. So I should preface this by saying this is made from antique French keys. The significance of open and closed, shut in or shut out, separated or connected, public or private, abounds across the story of the convent, culminating in 1997 when a property developer threatened to return the Abbotsford Convent to a closed community. Curious mushrooms and lichens sprout from the iron keys, revealing an unexpected and diverse potential for life waiting to erupt. These are recordings from the gates at the convent. This one is called the daisy chain, and it's a necklace, but also underneath are 111 scattered petal earrings. It's all silver. And the narration, the poetry and the narration is written by Anna McGahn. So, founded in response to local destitution as a result of an exodus of men to the goldfields, for 111 years the Abbotsford Convent was a home for orphaned and abandoned girls. An ephemeral symbol, the daisy recalls the seasonal beauty of the contemplative gardens, evoking the light-hearted games of children and the delight with which the gardens are experienced now. The flower garland is used by many cultures to signify welcome and belonging within the historical context of children in institutional care. The meaning of this floral wreath and its plucked petal earrings shifts to reveal mourning and loss.
He loves me not. Loves me, he left at night, he left in the midday blaze, he ran out like milk and bread. My papa went into the furnace where they boil down the gold into families again. I've picked out the most beautiful from the garden of good and evil. I've made them for my mother. I've crushed them already for my brother. I've used my hands, see? I've not eaten more than my fair portion. I have been picked to be here. I have been picked like petals, dropped into the same dust my papa once stood in. Where is my mama? See, look, mama, I have so many sisters, but they do not smell like home. Mama, see, I've learned where our treasure truly lies. He loves me not, he loves. See, I have learned all picked flowers die. Mama, he wanted golden sons, not silver daughters, didn't he?
That piece is quite emotional. I had a lot of the women whose mothers had been orphans or whose mothers had been sent to the laundries to do work in there came through the show, and a lot of them came out of that exhibit bawling. It was really unexpected. So this is Teardrops and Shadows, and they kind of lead down to a meadow of flowers, which the flowers I've made from metal that's come off the restorations at the convent. Falling teardrops acknowledge hardships that many who lived at the convent suffered. Their shadows are the traces of the stories embedded in the architecture. By reorienting the tears, pointing their apex to the middle, they become flowers. On the banks of the Yarra, where tears have fallen, a meadow is beginning to bloom, out from the materials of its restoration, highlighting a new season of possibilities for its use and expression. This is a collaboration with the ANAM musicians. This is the beautiful Anna wearing one of the artworks, the almond branch that buds, blossoms and fruits. Cast from an almond tree from the convent's gardens, the brooch references the biblical story of Aaron's staff, where though cut from the tree, an almond branch continues to produce life that represents the spectrum of seasonal growth. Worn across the heart, the brooch points to an ecosystem of artists immersed in place, sprouting creativity at a variety of stages and through varied seasons. It pays to be married to IT to create these digital, he and I worked to create these digital animations. So that's the almond tree actually that the branch was cast from. I fabricated the flowers from silver. This is another ANAM musician, James Littlewood, trombonist, peering into the water. So yes, this is a pool of reflection. So it's about 1 metre diameter. Spun aluminium anodised. Embodying 2 disciplines of monastic life, Sailor invites you to pause and reflect. Peering into the water, the viewer is positioned within a reflection of the architecture around them. Looking more deeply, the trace of a quatrefoil emerges, and the decorative symbol of religious architecture forms a halo around the viewer's reflection. That you stand within these walls today, engaging with art conceived on these grounds, is the expression of the vision and tenacity of people whose sustained efforts shifted this space to a place that continues to find its resurrection through the people who interact with it. The Round Table. The Round Table honours the vision of the 5 local people who gathered weekly around a kitchen table to build the 7-year campaign that would see the Abbotsford Convent rescued from private redevelopment and restored to the people. Below its joyful spread of wine glasses, golden light gleams through the iconic rows of windows of the convent building. Could these 5 people have understood what their efforts would mean to the creative community that are now housed in there? So this is a very short interview with Sue Bannerman, who is really the instigator of the campaign. That she's the one that read the yellow notice that saw had the plans on it and went, hang on, something's not right about this, and had that sustained fight for the precinct for nearly 8 years.
It was just part of the community, and it was a sleepy, sort of exquisite part of Melbourne that was a well-held secret. And from then, I stood up and said, well, who wants to be on the committee? And then we all went back to my kitchen and we sort of regrouped, and that's when we started. We didn't have our proper name by then, but that's when we'd started. And that was the beginning of 8 years of regularly meeting every Tuesday evening for 8 years. It was quite amazing. So we wanted it to be kept open that was the most important thing, to be kept open for the community, because we all had a sense of ownership, and actually, rightly so, because it was Crown land. So we knew we had to come up with a project that would be, and it would need to be sustainable, talking about sustainability, but that would be there and would be open for everyone. Oh, well, it's beautiful. It's open, it's dynamic, it's got a beautiful energy of its own, and it's thriving, and millions of visitors, and it's pretty much, which was our vision. I mean, it's gorgeous. In the end, it was shown that it would stack up, which it has. Not without hard work on behalf of the organisation, but it is, yes. And what a joy it is, isn't it? Where would we be without it?
This is the biggest necklace I've ever made, and the softest. The Great Escape, it's made from sheets, as you can see. That's a very tall room that's in. It's actually in the north laundries where the girls used to wash the sheets. Following the model of the Magdalen asylums of Europe, the Sacred Heart Dormitory was established to rehabilitate young women who were without family support, had broken the law, or did not conform to the social expectations of the time. Separated from the other girls living at the convent, young women worked as unpaid labourers in large-scale commercial laundries. By day they laundered sheets, by night they slept in open halls containing row upon row of beds with little privacy.
I wash these sheets till they are free of human bodies. Cold water removes the taste of skin. I wash this body, my body, in the same streams. And it seems the stains remain. I wonder if my wedding dress will be white. I wonder how many women received white sheets, white knuckles, white habits, instead of white silk. I wonder how to get this out with my bare hands. That which I touched, that which I took, that which turned me out of heaven. I wonder how many times I will bleed in this place. I wonder where the sheets go in their dreams, in their sleepless nights in city lights, when they twist and bunch around the shapes of other people while God isn't looking. I wonder how many sheets will lower me out the window and back into his arms. I wonder if the sun will dry me into stiffness too, render me holy in the morning, as the dew lifts and the light steals, and the beds and the saints and the wide-eyed brides beg for their clothes back.
And the last one, amazing, you guys are amazing, sorry. This is called Vic's Rosary, and it's made from a lot of the building materials that I've salvaged from the site. So, formed from the clay harvested from the Yarra. Sorry, I will start that again. Beads formed from the clay harvested from the Yarra acknowledge the land pre-settlement, taking the form of a rosary where groups of beads symbolise a decade. Set like gems, the necklace is punctuated by salvaged building materials and architectural vignettes. Vic's Rosary takes its name from a builder with a long association with the convent. Having first worked here during his apprenticeship in his teens, when it was an active convent, returning in his late 70s to carry out heritage restorations. The Rosary is an ode to material knowledge and the dedicated practice of craftsmanship over time.
I've always loved discovering different architectural details around the convent. They appeal to me as a craftsperson. The idea for Vic's Rosary came because years back I met a smiling man who was part of a team of builders working on the heritage restorations here. Vic stood out because he was well into his 70s, was super fit and carried an enthusiasm for both his own craft and that of the creative community, always checking in to see how my projects were going and quick to lend a hand. From time to time he would retire, popping back not long after in his overalls, having found the quiet life just too frustrating. Over time, I heard that Vic had first learned his trade as an apprentice builder here when he was a teenager. He would have been one of the few men allowed within this closed community. I often think about crafted objects as embodied time, and how attaining the skills to create is an act of ongoing discipline and devotion. In thinking about a piece that could honour those things, symbolised by Vic's life, I came to learn that a rosary is a wearable tool for prayer and reflection. Traditionally, the clusters of small beads represent a decade, while the larger beads between represent significant events. For the rosary, I harvested the clay from the Yarra to make the beads, acknowledging the land. Set like gems into bezels are architectural vignettes and pieces of repurposed building materials that have been salvaged from the convent. In a section like this, these fragments of gelato-coloured tiles come from the bathrooms in Sacred Heart. They reflect a cultural shift where the nuns moved towards a more contemporary architectural style, hoping to connect with the young women under their care. An element like this one refers to the timbers you find in the linen rooms that were hand-stained to take on the appearance of wood grain, and paved bluestone speaks of the Good Shepherd Chapel, convent paths, and the bluestone quarries that used to be in this area. Vic's rosary is an ode to material knowledge and the dedicated practice of craftsmanship over time.
And that's it.